Hello. Welcome to the Just in Time Cafe's webinar. I am Elizabeth Swan, co-founder of the Just in Time Cafe, and I'll be your moderator today. And today's webinar is titled, How Process Gemba Walks Motivate People to Learn. And our presenter today is the inimitable Tracy O'Rourke. And let me tell you a little bit about her. I've known Tracy for over 17 years, Tracy. 17 years.
17.
We've both been in the process improvement space for a long time. Over 50 years combined, Tracy. How about that? You know?
Ancient. We're ancient.
Ancient in the best way. We are co-founders of the Just in Time Cafe. We are co-hosts of the Just in Time Cafe podcast, co-authors of the Problem Solvers Toolkit. We're both instructors at UC San Diego. Right now with the Lean Six Sigma leadership course. And Tracy is the chair of the SoCal Lean Network, and she's a member of AME, that's Association for Manufacturing Excellence, West Region Board. They are very lucky, Tracy. Welcome.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I really hope you enjoyed the music as well. I think we should just play it in the background the whole time, but you know, we might get distracted a little. Okay.
Just a few housekeeping. What were you going to say?
No, go ahead.
Just a few housekeeping notes before we begin. You can ask questions anytime by entering them into the chat area. Please address it to everyone, not just us panelists or us hosts, because everyone loves to see your comments. Everyone loves to see your questions, and it's just going to spur more interaction, which is what we love. So keep that in mind. There's also a question area. So if I find a question in there, I'll root it out, but mainly we are watching that chat. We welcome your participation. Tracy's also going to ask you some specific questions throughout the session, so be prepared to respond. Videos of our webinar are available for free. We post them regularly on the Just in Time Cafe website. That's spelled jitcafe.com. So simply check the webinar page for all of our past webinars. And Monday is when the webinars go up after the Thursday webinar. And we'll send you an email to let you know if you registered for this webinar or any webinar. We'll always alert you when the post is up. So this first activity is sharing where you are from. We love how far and wide people sign up for our stuff. We love finding out where they are and how early it is and how late it is. So go ahead, if you've not already, put in the chat session where you're joining us today. And oh my goodness, Tracy, there's a lot of people here.
I see a lot of friendly and familiar faces. I'm saying hello to everybody.
That's crazy. Shane in Lincoln, Nebraska. We got Dave in Greenville. Oh my goodness. Ruth from Ottawa. Welcome, Ruth. Mike Osterling. Respect. We've got David where are you, David? We've got Jennifer. I know she's on the West Coast. We've got Gina, Loma Linda. Welcome. Almont, Ontario. I knew you were in Canada, Jennifer. I just couldn't remember where. Sam Morgan. And yes, she is inimitable. And who have we got? Humberto from Mexico. Yes, Tracy. We've got Canada. We've got Mexico. We've got our neighbors. And we've got Debbie Barnard from Dubai, man, the UAE. We are rocking the far or the Middle East. We've got Kelly in Tokyo. Thank you for showing up, Kelly. You are awesome. David in Bend, Oregon. Mary from Kansas. And Giselle in Abu Dhabi. Awesome, Giselle. Mary Beth. Welcome. So good to see your face in New Hampshire. An East Coaster, Tracy. I've got an East Coaster. It's not all about San Diego. No offense, Creusa. We've got Allie in Ohio, Evan in Charlotte, Toronto, San Diego, good Lord, Vermont, Washington. Tracy, I can't even come up. You have attracted a big crowd.
Well, I will say one of my favorites is from Tony from tropical, exotic Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Ooh, I have done a lot of work in Cedar Rapids. It is tropical and exotic. So with that, I'm handing the world over to you, Tracy.
Awesome. Everybody, thanks for joining. I'm super excited about today's topic. It actually is supposed to say how process walks motivate people to improve, not learn, but we all learn while we're improving anyways. So just a little bit about the JIT Cafe. Many of you have been to these webinars before, but this is a place that Elizabeth and I have created because we want to cultivate a hub where problem solvers can connect, share, and grow and not get broke. We should probably add that to the tagline, Elizabeth, because we provide these free webinars and videos. We also co-host a podcast called the Just-in-Time Cafe, and we featured lots of lean authors, practitioners, and leaders on there like Jeffrey Liger, Katie Anderson, Mark Graben, Mike Osterling, Jeff Toyster, you name it. We always look for people we love and are doing great work. So that's a little bit about us. We've got a couple of core values, obviously cultivating community. We also have, and we like to have a trailblazing spirit. We feel like we try to be, we encourage each other and challenge each other to do things better and hopefully inspire others to create a constant state of awesomeness. And we believe in a rising tide, which is we lift each other up. We will strengthen the global problem solving community and what is good for the planet by doing so. So thank you so much for joining us. And today we are going to be talking about process walks and how they motivate people to improve. Not just what a process walk is, but really spending time around, well, what I'm going to call brain psychology. So we're going to talk about what a process walk is briefly, why we do them, and really spend more of the time talking about how process walks motivate people to improve and how process walks fulfill something in the book called Switch. I don't know if many of you have read the book Switch by the Heath brothers, but this is actually something that inspired me a great deal and something I use with clients as well as with students to teach them about how to incorporate change in a positive way. So hopefully you'll learn something today, and I'll learn something today too. So let's first cover what is a process walk, process Gemba walk. So again, this is when we really go to where the work is taking place. We like to call it a process walk, the English term, but Gemba walk is very popular, as many of you know, which is the Japanese term. That means go to where the work occurs, basically. And basically, there are different kinds of walks. So there's a leader process walk, and those are relatively short, about an hour, maybe depending on what leader you are, supervisor, you're doing that daily. Managers and directors, they do it less often, but they typically are shorter, about an hour. And it's really an opportunity to learn and teach for both leaders and problem solvers. Then there's also the process Gemba walk for improvement teams. And that's the one that I'm talking about. This is usually takes a bit longer to do. Sometimes, usually about 4 to 6 hours, but sometimes it'll take a whole day or a day and a half, depending on how many people you're going to bring and talk to. And this can occur during a rapid improvement event. It's kind of like the walks are geared towards building profound knowledge of current state and, most importantly, a shared understanding of the process for the people that work in the process. Because what I find more and more these days is there isn't a shared understanding of what the process is. So this can really help. So we talk at length about leader Gemba walks in our leadership course at UC San Diego. And the second type of process walk, again, that really occurs with improvement teams physically walking the process together, interviewing each other, and they're really working and understanding that process. So it's not about going to a conference room and talking about it. It's really even walking to the cubicles, if that's what's required, to see where the process is occurring and the work. It has been done in virtual environments before on Zoom. You can do process walks virtually, absolutely. And some of them are very successful. And you may not be going to their physical space, but you actually get to see what's happening in the process, at least through Zoom. So that's maybe where a coworker is going to show you what they're doing to the thing as it goes through the process. So surprisingly, and I don't know if many of you have seen this, a lot of you online are consultants and you're in process improvement as well. So I have a question for you. When I've engaged with clients and I plan to walk a process, in several cases, I discover that the process has never been walked before. It's kind of amazing how often workers are only exposed to their piece of the process, and they could go years, decades, even forever without seeing what their coworkers do upstream or downstream from them. Have you guys seen that too? What are they saying, Elizabeth? Is that what people are seeing out there too? Okay, so Shane says he agrees. Yes. Okay, good. That's what I thought too. I'm actually really surprised. And culturally, we can analyze that. Well, why is that? Is it not okay? Is it that they're told not to do that? What are some of the reasons? But I have heard people say, "Oh, I've worked here for 10 years. I'm actually about to go do one in the next couple of weeks." They have never walked the process, and this is a very old organization. So it's common for me to hear, "I've worked here for 10 years. I've always wondered what they do over there, or the next step in the process. I can't wait to see it." So there is, and you'd be surprised how much redundancy and rework is created or exists in that process because workers don't really get the opportunity to see the whole process. So the other question I want to know is, I'm guessing a lot of you have also participated in a walk. So maybe you've heard that people haven't done it. How many of you have actually participated in a walk? And was it a good experience, bad experience, ugly experience? Just post in the chat window, yes, you have, or no, you haven't, or if it was good or bad. I'd love to hear that as well. And because I'd say sometimes they're not done well, right? So sometimes one of the things I've seen is sometimes the ground rules aren't followed and it's not a good experience. It's not supposed to be a gotcha moment, right? It's supposed to be positive. So what are they saying out there, Elizabeth? Are a lot of people?
It's a mix. Sorry, I was on mute. You got yes, ugly, yes, good experience, yes, not yet. We'll do it with my team. Absolutely, all kinds of experience. Yes, and good, pretty regular. Good, yes, enlightening. Yes, good. Yes, always a learning experience. Yes, I have good experiences for the most part. All walks are good experiences from a learning perspective. Good, bad, and ugly. It's nice. Yes, good, bad. No, I haven't. Yes, and good, powerful. Yes, all over the place. Good, bad, and ugly. Walk was bad because most people were bashing each other. Ooh, Tracy's going to talk about that. Yes, and it was a good experience. Yes, and very educational. Yes, great to walk. Thank you, guys.
That was awesome. Made that a poll, but that's okay. So thank you for that, Elizabeth. So it looks like most people had a good experience. Some people had not a great experience. And then a few people had an ugly experience. And, our goal is to try to remove the ugly as much as possible when it comes to doing process walks, because they are important and we want it to be a good experience. We want people to do walks. We really do. And so how do we learn from it? How do we actually make it a good thing? Because if it's a horrible experience, nobody's going to want to do that again. So anyway, that's I'll talk more about that later. But there's lots of reasons why process walks are very valuable. And one of them is there is a challenge with improving transactional processes. They have an extra challenge over manufacturing. Does anybody know what it is? Does anybody know why it's a little harder? And this might be open for disagreement, but it might be a reason why it's a little harder to implement process improvement in transactional processes.
Oh, there's a nice way to say it. It's hard to watch the widget.
Yeah, what's the widget in the process, right? So that is a great example. And you guys all have it. You guys know it. The biggest reason is most of these processes are invisible. We can't see the process. It's in someone's email, it's in a software application, and the flow and the number of handoffs and the people involved are not readily visible. I'm working with someone right now, I keep saying that, and this is why this is so top of mind for me. And they don't even know who's involved in the process. They have no idea. And so it's very important to first make the process visible. I mean, this picture, it's an old picture. I know, you can tell. Look at those computers. Do you see a process here? No, people are just sitting in their cubicles. And so how do you know when something goes wrong with the process? Well, usually it's because somebody sitting in this room blows a gasket and they lose it. Right? And when things go wrong, somebody loses their mind. And then we look at them and go, what's wrong with them? We tend to blame the person and wonder why they can't do their job. right? But it happens a lot, unfortunately. And we want to try to avoid that. And what's worse, if we aren't diligent with the process over time, design will start to look like this, right? So you've probably seen this before too. This is one of my favorite slides because it's just a great picture of what a process can sometimes look like when there's no diligence around process health, right? So it's a knot of twisted pipes. When you look at this picture, does a process that you work in come to mind? Or maybe this reminds you of a process you were a victim of as a customer. I literally just did another webinar this morning. And I asked somebody, has anybody had a bad experience lately as a customer where you walked through a process and it was just painful? And what do you think she said? It's like the number one answer. Yes, the DMV. I'm sorry. I am not trying to blame the DMV, but boy, have people had some bad experiences with the DMV. So this is when I'm a victim of a process as a customer, this is when my process improvement OCD kicks in. I'm just going about my merry way, trying to, live my life. And I have to do something like I get health insurance, or I have to reconcile something with my bank, or talk to customer service about my flights getting canceled. And then I realize I'm a defect. I'm a defect in somebody's process. And and that's frustrating because I know that it's avoidable. I'm getting stuck in somebody's process. I'm getting frustrated because I'm in one of these elbows in the pipe, and it's frustrating. And so I've heard a lot of people mention a lot of processes where they're like, yeah, these processes are painful and it could be very complicated. Or maybe you're a manager and you inherited a process that looks like this. Or you work in this process and your staff doesn't feel empowered to fix it. I mean, whose fault is it? Is this process design someone's fault? No. The people who have to work in the process are the biggest victims of a bad process. So either the process is painful for employees, or the process is painful for customers, or both. And so Deming says that most of the time we blame the people, when in actuality it's process design. And he has also said a bad system will beat a good person every time. You can put a great worker in a compromised process, and guess who wins? The process will win. And so it's no fun. How many of you have been beaten up by a process before? It's no fun. So that's ultimately what we're trying to do with processes. We're trying to really get a picture of what really the process is, and figuring out what the current state is really one of these goals for the process walk. And so that's one reason why we do process walks. Another reason why we do process walks is because there are 4 versions to every process. What you think it is, what it truly is, what it should be, and what it could be. And so these are, most of the time, people are operating with the perspective on the top left, what they think the process is. They don't really know what the process is, and now they're trying to change it. And so we really want to truly know how the process works today, so that the people that are working in the process have a good understanding of it. And maybe they've worked in this process before, but supervisors may not know anymore. So that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is understand what the process is truly today. Then people can understand some of the barriers that they're running into. And then the last reason why I'll mention why we need to do process walks is because processes, we manage people vertically in departments full of staff and a manager on top. And we typically do this by functional departments. But the problem is that processes run horizontally, and we create silos often. You guys have seen that. What are some of the challenges we run into with silos? Often it's people aren't communicating. Let's see, do we have a question out there, Elizabeth?
Yes. Michael's asking, how do you get to learn alternate processes that exist, quote unquote, out there? And I'm not sure, I was asking, does that mean in other businesses, sort of at the world at large, or within the same organization? People are doing things differently. Yeah.
So I think and Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, because I've heard this before, everybody's doing it a different way. So you find out, it's a process, but 17 people are doing it a different way. So how do you find out all the alternate processes? Well, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So I always like to tell people the Grateful Dead rule when you're mapping processes. Does anybody know the Grateful Dead rule out there? So the Grateful Dead rule, and I apologize, but people remember it. You stay as high as you can, as long as you can. So what is at the highest level, the process that's happening? So we try to map that first, and then we start to identify, do people have agreement at that high level? And you can map out the 17 different ways. I don't necessarily know if you have to. Sometimes when the goal is to create some sort of standard, sometimes we bring people together to come up with the best way, the one standard. And so that as a result of that, we have a reduction in how many different ways there are out there. But it really does depend on your goal. If you're looking to improve the process, maybe you identify the way that's quickest or the way that's fastest or slowest, and then you figure out why that's happening. Sometimes people just don't know that all the steps they're adding are creating long lead times. If anybody else has suggestions out there, oh, Mike Oshling, he got it. You stay as high as you can, as long as you can. We've talked about the Grateful Dead rule, him and I. So as a matter of fact, I think I got it from him. So I hope that helped. But ultimately, I think it's a trap, honestly. That's a whole nother webinar, is to get stuck mapping out every single iteration of the way something has been done. Because if we're looking to improve, that's going to take a long time. So again, I tend to stay as high level as possible until we have to go into the weeds. Sometimes there's 17 different ways to do something, but it doesn't affect the lead time. So who cares? Right. So I think you have to figure out and prioritize what you want to map. And then Sally, great suggestion. What happens 80% of the time, and map that. I love that too. I've used that as well. So hopefully that will help. Okay. So we've talked about kind of 3 reasons why we want to do process walks. First of all, processes are invisible. They tend to be a little overcomplicated when they're invisible. There's different versions, or at least people's understanding of the versions are different. And then finally, the way we manage people vertically and processes run horizontally, it doesn't create a lot of visibility with processes too. So these are all reasons why we should be mapping a process. And we are going to actually do more webinars about process walks coming up in the next couple of months, how to conduct a process walk, what are some of the things you want to do to plan a process walk. And we also have some templates already on our website that Elizabeth's going to share a little bit later as well. Okay, so guess what? So we've talked about what process walks are basically, why they're important. So now we're going to shift gears a little bit and discuss how process walks motivate people to change, the main purpose of this webinar. So I've heard many people say, not in a public forum really, but they say, getting people to change is a slog, right? So how many would you agree with that? Is it hard to get people to change? I mean, maybe, okay, I'm sure it's a normal distribution. You've got your early adopters, and then you've got your innovators, and then you've got sort of the middle, and then you've got I don't even know what you want to call them, the resistors. So it's a normal distribution, and recognizing that not everybody's going to change can help manage that too, like your expectations. But yeah, I'd say that a lot of people run into this. They feel like they're forcing change, and now they're in a position they really don't want to be, because guess what? Forcing people to change isn't fun, is it? And so what if you could find a way to naturally motivate people to want to change? What if you could find it? Well, guess what? It's surprisingly right under your nose in the Lean toolkit. So we're going to talk about what that is, because I don't think people necessarily know that process walks are a change management tool. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about a little bit about brain psychology. And so this is where the book Switch comes in. So how many of you have read this book? Have any of you read this book, Switch by the Chip and Dan Heath. They also wrote the best-selling author. They were the best-selling author of Made to Stick. They've done a couple other books too, Elizabeth, right? Not just these two. They've had some new ones come out recently. But the reason why I love this book is because this book, I have actually used this a lot in my continuous improvement travels with helping people along the way. I really like it. The information is really practical and very applicable. And this change research that in this book comes from decades of counterintuitive research in psychology, sociology, and other fields by Stanford and Harvard and Duke University professors. And the book highlights research on successful change when the people who spearhead the change have little or no authority or power. So that is also very telling. So in a process improvement world, you might be helping a team as an expert, if you will, but it's up to them to make the change. So often you don't have all the power. You can't say, thou shalt, right? And who wants to do that anyways, right? So I'm forcing you to change. So do what I tell you. That just doesn't feel good either. So, this was really interesting to me because it's telling people it's showing how people have successfully made change happen with no power to do so. So we're going to unlock some of the learnings of this book. And the first part of this book is to understand the brain psychology related to it and an analogy that they bring up. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this analogy first. So the authors introduce this wonderfully descriptive metaphor of the elephant and the rider. And they glean this from psychologist Jonathan Haidt's book, The Happiness Hypotheses. So basically what they say is the brain has two sides. The emotional side is the elephant and the rational side is the rider. And perched atop the elephant, the rider holds the reins and seems to be the leader, but the rider's control is very precarious because the rider is so small relative to the elephant. So analytically, it's smaller, the rational brain, but the emotional part is bigger, has more weight, pardon the pun. So the 6-ton elephant, and guess what? If there's a disagreement between the rider and the elephant, who's going to win? Well, the elephant's going to win. So because the rider's going to lose, he's completely overmatched. So most of us are very familiar with this situation. Our elephant overpowers our rider. I'd love to hear some examples of this. So for example, okay, this happens to me all the time. I love food. I know I'm supposed to be eating the broccoli, but I don't want to. I want the cookies. Okay, that's my elephant overpowering my rider. And you've experienced this if you've ever slept in, you've overeaten, you procrastinated, you skipped the gym, or you abandon your piano lessons, right? So this happens all the time. Our elephants overpower us, and the size makes it very difficult to be the rider, and struggling with an unruly animal can be exhausting. So there's the emotion behind it. And when there's conflict between our emotions and our rational brain, our emotional brain and our rational brain, it's similar to the rider needing a break after working to keep the elephant in check for any length of time. Our brain gets worn out, and we've got some emotional strain. So a quick story, this really hit home for me. I live here in San Diego, as many of you know, many of you are in San Diego too. I went to SeaWorld here in San Diego. I met a friend there. I told her to bring her kids to the Shamu show. And at the time, I had smaller kids, so I had seen the show fairly recently. And so I kind of knew what the show was and what was coming. And as they got started with the music, I recognized the crescendo in the music when Shamu was supposed to jump out of the water, but no Shamu showed up. And after a bit of confusion, someone came out and they said, I apologize. Something has happened that hasn't happened in 8 years. And I was like, what the heck's going on? And he went ahead and explained the process of engaging a whale to perform. It's a series of agreements. And most of the time, one of the whales of the 8 would agree to do the show. Well, this time, none of the 8 whales agreed to do the show. And he looked at the audience and he said, well, we don't really have a choice. Is if an 8,000-pound whale doesn't want to perform, we really can't do anything about it. We're very sorry. Come back for the 5 p.m. show and maybe you'll have better luck. Right? So this was a great example of the performers, they don't have as much control over the emotional side. And so when you think about it with people that you work with, the theory works that way too. If you want to change how other people behave, we can't forget that they have their own elephants and their own riders to contend with. And if you want to help people change their habits or initiate a change in your workplace, you have to keep in mind that you need to address both the rider and the elephant to motivate them to change their work or their behavior. And often we are only speaking to the rider at work. For whatever reason, we tend to focus on the rational side. We come up with our business case and the financial reason and the dollars and all that stuff. But it's not speaking to the elephant. It's not speaking to the emotion. So this is a good example of the psychology of the brain. You can try to rationalize to yourself or others why something's good, but emotional side is holding all the weight. So that's something that we want to keep in mind. So let's talk a little bit more about these characteristics of the elephant and the rider. So the rational mind and the emotional mind, remember, they compete for control, both the rational mind and the emotional mind. It's always a wrestling in here. The rational mind wants a beach body. The emotional mind wants the Oreo cookie. The rational mind wants to change something at work. The emotional mind loves the comfort of the existing routine. So it's been said before, we're familiar with these situations where the elephant overpowers the rider. So guess what? The elephant's weakness is lazy, skittish. They want instant gratification. But guess what? Their strength is love, compassion, loyalty, and that spine stiffening feel when you want to stand up for yourself. That's the elephant. The rider, they're analytical. They sometimes spin their wheels. They don't get things done. They analyze something for 20 minutes, but no decisions are made. So those are the weaknesses of the rider, but the strengths are they're very rational, thoughtful, fact and data-based. So at work, you hear people speak to the WIFM a lot, what's in it for them, and that they're trying to mobilize change, but we tend to only speak to the rider and we ignore the elephant. So we need to address both. You've heard me say this already. And here's why. So if that doesn't convince you, maybe this will. So hold on a second. Okay, so here's the thing. Many people have a misperception about how change occurs. People think change occurs like this. We think, we analyze, we change. But that's not how change happens. How change really occurs is we see, we feel, we change. And so thinking and analyzing is speaking to the rider. Seeing and feeling is speaking to the elephant. So you need the elephant on your side, and we often don't do a good job of that. So I'm going to share a couple stories. This is actually from the book Switch, and it gives an example of speaking to both the rider and the elephant to give you an example. So in this example, a man determined to reduce operation expenses hired a summer intern to collect data on a single item, gloves. And these were worn by most workers in the facility. So the intern identified all types of gloves and had to trace back where the company was paying for them, who the vendor was, all that stuff. So guess what? The intern returned with the discovery that the factories were purchasing 424 different types of gloves from 78 different vendors, all negotiating different pricings, amounting to about a $700,000 opportunity for the company. So it was shared with this man, the executive, and then they shared it with the broader staff, and people nodded and okay, yeah, that seems like a problem, but it didn't really generate the outcome he was looking for in terms of sharing this information. So Then he told the intern, I want you to collect a specimen of each glove, and I want you to tag it with the price paid for that glove. So all the gloves were gathered up and brought to the boardroom and piled on the conference table. And the executives actually were astounded. So they looked at this huge pile of gloves, started to pick them up. They discovered that they were the same gloves with different prices. And guess what? The glove pile became a traveling roadshow. The reaction was visceral, and they were like, this is crazy. And then they started to think, we're crazy. So guess what? As a result of that, it was prioritized to change the purchasing process. They ended up saving a great deal of money, and the visual pile of gloves had triggered emotion. So not everyone would have tried this, but he knew he had to appeal to more than just the analytical side. And it showing them the numbers. Again, there may have been a follow-up of the meeting, but it could have got lost in the shuffle. So again, if you only react to the writer, you have direction, but you don't necessarily have motivation. So that's really the point, is to address both. How do you speak to both? Because that created a sense of emotion. It was the same thing, same problem, but just packaged differently. And when you think about it, they do this in commercials. They try to speak to the elephant, the emotional side. They have 1 to 2 minutes to trigger emotion and engage or motivate the elephant. Do you guys remember? I still remember it, okay, because it was such a powerful commercial. Do you remember that commercial? This is your brain. And they show you an egg. And then they say, and this is your brain on drugs. And there's eggs cooking in the pan. I mean, how many of you remember that? I remember that. Guess what? I don't do drugs because of that commercial. So it made me, I'm sure that, they could have given me all the financial or long-term effects in some article, but all I needed to see was that commercial, and it hit me. It had emotion in it. And that's what they do with other commercials, like adopting pets. It's very elephant. Thank you, Devin. You are absolutely right. It's motivating the elephant. So I'm going to give you one more example again from the book. They had such great examples. I just decided to share them with you as opposed to coming up with some of my own. But ultimately, there's another example. This was actually 2 health researchers wanted to change habits in America, believe it or not. They wanted people to eat healthier. So they brainstormed, well, what should we do? How do we help make this impact? So they actually decided to focus on whole milk, the single largest source of saturated fat in America's diet. So they knew that if people could switch to 1% milk, they would be at the USDA recommended levels of saturated fat. So they targeted this campaign, monitoring milk sales, and they did a campaign to educate, and ultimately it did work. So I'm going to share what that campaign was. So ultimately, this is speaking to the writer. You can look, when you look at whole milk and you look at non-fat milk, obviously there's 150 calories with the whole milk, 70 calories comes from fat, and 25% of that is from saturated fat. So then if you look at non-fat milk, it's 0 calories and saturated fat 0%. So you could share that. You could share that with all your friends and your kids and all that. Yeah, sure, go for it. But again, where's the emotion here? So what they discovered is they found an interesting comparison that they thought they would use. And that comparison was, milk is the single largest source of saturated fat, and the amount of saturated fat in 1 glass of whole milk is the same as 5 strips of bacon. Now, are you going to go for the milk or the bacon? So I'm sure a bunch of bacon lovers across America are really happy to know that they can still have 5 strips of bacon. But I mean, now that's really speaking to the elephant, right? Motivating the elephant. And it's just, again, what could we say? What could we find that's really going to get people to say, what? No, are you kidding me? That's right. Sherry loves bacon. Jennifer, I think I just gave everybody, a squirrel, bacon. Everybody's going to be eating bacon for lunch, I'm sure. So they had a targeted campaign spreading this, right? They created a campaign with a commercial, and it had bacon in the pan, very similar to the egg commercial. And they said, do you want the bacon or you want this 1 glass of milk? Guess what? After the campaign, 41%. So basically, non-fat milk started to increase and 1% milk started to go down in the target area. And they were able to maintain that at 6 months later as well. So that's kind of the difference. Well, it's not really the difference. It's using both, right? It's using information that's analytical and rational and speaking to the emotion of people. And so that's really what we want to do with process improvement too. We want to make sure we're speaking to both. So we're going to spend a little time talking about motivating the elephant because this is where we are actually pretty good at directing and talking to the rider at work. Where we miss the boat is motivating the elephant. So there's two things that the book talks about. Well, actually, they talk about three, but we're going to share two in this session today because we're going to run out of time. Finding the feeling, a gut level emotional connection. Find a feeling, and then shrinking the change. These are the two ways you can motivate the elephant to help find emotional connection. And so when we want to find the feeling, we don't want it to be toxic feelings. We don't want fear. We don't want, disgust. We want emotion in a positive way. And so sometimes people say fear is good in the organization. I don't agree at all because it's not productive. So ultimately we want to find the feeling, and that's really where process walks come in. It's really around bringing that emotional connection to the forefront. How and why does this work? Because process walks show the pain people are going through as a result of the process. That's really what I've noticed is process walks, when people see the pain in the process, and sometimes they realize they're creating the pain, they actually want to make it better. So instead of somebody calling going, dude, you suck. How come you never send me this information? You need to start sending it to me right now. And then they get turned off and just hang up on the person. When they see actually what's happening in the process, they actually want to do something about it. And so that's really what's happening in the process walk. It's creating emotion. So you get to see all these discoveries. And many of you said, yes, it was a good experience. I'm going to guess that there was some emotion tied to that. It was, somebody discovered it was difficult, or they realized that's not what was happening. Or I've had people say they hate somebody and they think it's the person, and they would come in early and try to tell me, no, it's the person. I'm telling you, it's this person. And then after the walk, they go, oh yeah, their process is really horrible. I feel bad for that person. So ultimately, this is all of the emotion that's happening in process walks. And that's what we want to really hone in on that. And we also want to make sure that we do it right. If done well, process walks can really do it. So here's some of the ground rules. I'm not going to go into these ground rules because we're a little behind, but we've got this as a template on our website too. And you can see these, but you have to do a process walk right. You have to support and reinforce the ground rules so that people feel safe and people aren't blaming. And so here's the other challenge I also have is people, I'm sorry, I didn't move it. So the other challenge I see people do is sometimes they don't bring everybody with them. They go, I don't want to bother people. I'll just go walk it myself and I'll learn all about it. And then I'll tell them about it. Well, you just stole their opportunity to, first of all, motivate the elephant, number one. And now you also just crossed over from good intentions to involve people to now you're doing process improvement to people, right? So you want to avoid that. Oops. Yeah, it could be that quick. So we really want to involve, we want to spend the time planning and coordinating and involving others, because it's not about what we see if we're continuous improvement people, it's what they see. It's what they learn. It's what they feel. And then they're motivated to change. So keep that in mind. Okay, so my question to you is, how have you applied motivate the elephant concept using find the feeling in process improvement? So here are some of the things that we've talked about. A gut level emotional connection. That's what's happening in process walks. Even if people don't want to, that's what's happening. That's what I'm seeing happen. These are other ways you can conduct process walks. Some people talk about a burning platform. Some people bring up what's in it for me, but they do it in a very compelling way. And then sometimes we have actually marketing campaigns internally for process improvement. So what have you guys been seeing get implemented around find the feeling? Elizabeth, what have you seen?
I had this example with a client. It was a childcare center, a string of childcare centers, and they were constantly looking to open more childcare centers because there was a huge need, and it was an at-risk population that needed Head Start and other great programs. And I was working with the woman who was trying to reduce company expenses. She was in charge. She was an office manager, and she just said people are just buying whatever they want. They're buying, paper plates and things like that when they have dishwashers in the facilities. And she was working on a process and trying to get people to follow it. And she's getting a lot of resistance, like, well, I don't like that kind of soap, and I like using papers. And, so it was, and she finally figured out if she hit her goal, they could afford the mortgage on another childcare center. So once she told everyone the goal that they could get this childcare center and help all these children, everybody got on board. They started telling her where they found more opportunities, to save money, to get supplies in bulk, and to coordinate with all the facilities. So that was a huge find the feeling.
That is huge. Thank you, Elizabeth. I also was working with an organization. They felt like people weren't following their safety rules. People weren't using the helmets, the goggles, the safety shoes. There was signs posted everywhere. So they actually had a few people that had been hurt on the job come in and talk to people, and they weren't working there anymore because as a result of getting hurt. And guess what? They felt something. They started wearing the goggles and the helmets all the time. So there's emotion behind that as well, because it does happen. People don't think, oh, it's not going to happen to me.
Yeah, that's a great example. Mike Osterling is saying, pose and manage as experiments as opposed to change. Let's try this. Yes. Sally pointed out sharing voice of customer nightmare stories as a result of a bad process. Now, she was in hospitality, so they were front and center and could really speak to the experience of the customer. And then, thank you, Jennifer. Jay said, create urgency for change, but connect with the purpose. Yes, absolutely. And thank you, Debbie. Yeah, so good examples how to get there.
Yes, I really like Mike's as well, because it's also letting them do it, right? So post this, you do the experiment, you see how that works. You're empowered to make this experiment. Go see, and there's low risk. The idea of doing an experiment feels less risk to people, so it can encourage people. And I love Sally's comment too, nightmare stories. Yes, we hear that. We've heard a lot of those. It reminds people of what's important and why they're doing it. I worked at a company that had associates' kids participate in a safety video. Oh,
that's a good one.
That's a great one. I love that. So these are really great examples about how we're motivating the elephant and finding the feeling, because feelings are there. It's not, we bring feelings to work. Like a lot of people say, oh, you can't bring feelings to work. We're human. We bring our whole selves to work. We have anger, we have frustration, we have resentment, we have happiness, we have gratefulness. So we have pride. All those kinds of emotions are there. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, I'm going to move forward because we're running out of time a little bit. So one other thing you can do to motivate the elephant besides find the feeling is something called just shrink the change. Make the change feel smaller. And you can do that by jump-starting the change or a series of small changes that add up to big change. And so the idea behind this is changes can be small and trivial at first, but guess what? The elephant is moving, and that's the important part. And so that is also something that we sometimes will implement with process improvement too. How can you, sometimes you have smaller goals that you set up, or you let them know they're already doing it. Some people are already doing problem solving and they're already doing root cause analysis. It's not this monumental difference potentially. I mean, we've been problem solving our whole life. And so reminding people of that is really helpful. So I'll give you a couple examples and then we'll talk about some that maybe you guys have. So this is an example of Jumpstart the Change. This is also from the book. A local car wash had a loyalty card program. You get a stamp for every visit. And when the card was filled up, you get a free car wash. So there was two organizations, and one of them, you just get a blank card and you have to fill in 8 stamps, right? But the other group had a card with 10 stamps. But when you came in on your first time, they stamped it twice. Right? And so guess what? 6 months later, 19% of the 8 stamp earned a free car wash, but 34% of the Head Start group earned a free car wash. So there's something about, oh, look, I already got 2. I got to go back to this place. So how do we do that? How do we actually make the change, shrink the change, make it feel smaller, give them a feeling that they're already on their way? Like, why kill the momentum? So that's an example. And I'll share one more, and then we'll hear some examples from you guys. So another example of shrinking the change is, this is also in the book. It's called Money Snowball. So a couple had gotten themselves into a financial pickle, and they had student loans, cars, a house, $35,000 in credit card debt. And then they realized they were one accident away from bankruptcy, basically. And they read the book, The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. He actually promotes a very controversial technique called the money snowball. And this is when you list all your debts and arrange them in order from smallest debt to largest debt. And then you only make the minimum payments on all the debts, and every dollar goes towards the first one. Now, for those of you that have any financial background, a financial advisor would cringe at this approach. Why? What are they saying? No, you can't do it that way, because you should go after the highest interest, right? That's financially the most sense. But guess what? What this is achieving is the elephant, because if you go for the smallest one and you pay it off relatively quickly, you cross it off the list. Then you get to the second and the third, and you create this snowball. And each debt that is conquered is feeling good, and it's feeding the emotion. And so there's no mention of interest rates or high interest, and financial advisors are going to tell you not to do it that way. But this satisfies the elephant. And some people need their elephant satisfied in this way to make progress. So that's really important. So we've covered some basics for motivating the elephant. We've talked about find the feeling, and this is where process walks can help, and also shrinking the change. So how have you seen these applied? How have you seen shrinking the change and motivating or jumpstart the change or set small goals? How have you seen that happen in process improvement? Do you have any examples, Elizabeth?
Well, Sharon's chiming in that she paid off $48,000 that way with the money snowball. Debt-free elephant over here, LOL. Yeah. And just Carissa saying this method feels like you're winning. So just, a big deal there.
Good.
And I've seen that improvement where people tackle like the kata practice of tackling daily small experiments, right? So you've got a target and it might be out, a month or a few weeks, and then you're doing a little tackleable thing. And then the next day, say, how'd it work? Did I get a little closer? Did I get a little closer? So yeah.
Yes.
I realize that is probably shrinking the change. It is.
Yeah, definitely. And so if you have any other ideas about how to shrink the change and applying it to process improvement, go ahead and put them in the chat window for others, because I'm guessing many of you have applied some of these principles, and either you did know it or you didn't know it, but there's lots of examples out there. I always talk about reduced scope. How do we, if you've got a monumental project, how do we actually, take the elephant one bite at a time? Pardon the pun, but yeah, smaller projects. And those, I really like Mike's idea of doing experiments too. Small, short experiments could also help shrink the change. So there's lots to do out there. Okay. Wow, this webinar went really fast. So guess what? So the good news is I only had time to really talk about 2 things under Motivate the Elephant, but the book Switch basically says, if you really want to be successful with change, you actually have to address all 3 of these: direct the rider, motivate the elephant, and shape the path. You can't just do one. You should be doing all 3, because out of all of the change studies that they've looked at, all 3 of these were present. So if you're not, so again, we didn't get to cover all of them. I had to shorten it because we are out of time, but really you want to address all of these things at the strategic level for process improvement and at the project level for process improvement, directing the rider, motivate the elephant, and shape the path. So ultimately, if you haven't read the book, your call to action is to get that book, put it on your list. Somebody said they want to do a book club. Invite me because I love this book. And then I would say reflect. So if you really want to really embrace this, first think about a change that occurred recently in your organization. Were all three elements present? If not, which one was missed and what could have been done for that missing element? And then the other thing is think about a change that you want to make coming up or that you think you're going to be making. How will you apply all three of these components mentioned in the book for that change? And the name of the book is called Switch. It's by Chip and Dan Heath. And I'd recommend picking it up. Let's see, how much time do we have? Only 5 minutes. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the webinar today. What we basically covered was, let me see what we covered. What a Gemba walk is, why we do them, how process walks help motivate people to improve, and how process walks fulfill Switch, which is really motivating the elephant and shortening, making things smaller. Okay, so we've got a couple things. I don't know if you have any questions. You can put them in the chat window. Just a couple of updates as well. Did you want to speak to this?
Sure.
Elizabeth?
This is exciting. This is coming up in 3 weeks. This is Activate the Leader Within, Master Your Influence by Sonia Singh. She's saying influence is the ability to affect the thoughts and behaviors of others. It's how you work with and through others to achieve a goal. And it's about inspiring others to think or do something different. And regardless of your title, your background, or whether you're introverted or extroverted, you have the potential to be an inspiring and influential leader. So we'll have an hour with Sonia about achieving your goals quicker, strengthening relationships, saving time, convincing others, and increasing your level of impact. So stay tuned, man. I'm a huge fan of Sonia, so this will be great.
Too.
First time to the cafe. Yes, we really appreciate. And then if you have not heard it, our current podcast episode with Debbie Barnard, who's on this webinar right now. This is a fabulous story. She's in Dubai working for the Joint Commission, but she's also working to elevate female leaders. And she's working on a book, which will be out this fall, which is lessons from her first lean sensei, which is her mother at their Bahamian restaurant growing up. So I want that book. But listen to the podcast. It's fabulous. And we've also got great Q&A in there. And we review, I've forgotten which app that was, but we always review an app and we show you how it works. So those are full of lots of great information. If you haven't clued into our podcast, you better start because they're awesome. Right, Tracy?
Cool. Yes. Thank you. All right. Let's see if anybody has any other questions. I loved interviewing Debbie. I loved getting to know her on the interview. So excited about her new book coming out. So that's going to be coming out as well. Okay. Let's see. Does anybody have any questions, Elizabeth?
They're just loving you, Tracy, and they're appreciating you. So that's all you're getting is goodwill. No questions.
Okay, I will just do a shout out to David LaFollette, who is on this call. Yeah. David LaFollette was my very first customer when I left GE Appliances in the 90s. And I told him, "Oh, I'm leaving GE and I'm going to be a process improvement consultant. Will you pay me?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'll pay you." And he is the reason why I am still in this business. So I don't know if he's still here, but anyway, shout out to David LaFollette.
Well, I salute him too, man. I'm glad you're in this business with me.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the Just in Time Cafe. Come join us for a cup of lean caffeine next month as well.
See you there.